refuse to pay for our friend's now broken iPhone and sunglasses that our son broke. So my husband and I have this 6-month-old baby who's at that stage where he grabs literally everything. Your hair, your phone, your jewelry, whatever's in reach. We've been working on it, but he's a baby, so it's not like he understands boundaries yet. We always warn people before they hold him. Every single time. It's become our automatic thing now because he's fast and he gets excited when he grabs stuff. Last week, my friend Jean came over to visit. She hadn't seen the baby in person yet and was super excited to hold him. The second she walked in, I told her straight up that she should take off her sunglasses because he will grab them. These weren't just any sunglasses either. They were Gucci. She told me earlier they cost like 800 pounds, which is absolutely insane to me, but whatever. Jean literally rolled her eyes at me. Then she said I was hogging my own baby and being overprotective. I wasn't even holding him at that point. I told her again that I was serious, and she just said it's fine. So she takes him and she's standing there with him in her arms. The sunglasses are pushed up on top of her head. My husband and I are just watching because we already know what's about to happen. Then Jean pulls out her iPhone to take a selfie with the baby. It's the new iPhone 16. She's holding it up, trying to get the angle right, and our son's little hands are already reaching up. He grabs the sunglasses off her head, gets them in his grip, and you can see how excited he is about it. He starts waving his arms around like babies do when they're happy, and the sunglasses go flying across the room. Jean screams. Like, actually screams. The baby immediately panics because obviously a loud scream right next to his face is terrifying. He starts flailing his arms and legs and smacks her phone right out of her hand. The iPhone hits our tile floor and the screen just shatters. The sunglasses landed near the couch and one of the arms snapped off. I grabbed the baby from her as fast as I could because he was crying now and she was still freaking out. My husband just stood there and shrugged at her. Jean picked up her phone and the sunglasses and she was furious. She turned to me and said I need to buy her a new iPhone 16 and replace her sunglasses. She literally said give her the money for both, which comes out to 2,300 pounds. I straight up told her no. I said we can't pay that because that's not even what I make in a month and I'm on maternity leave right now anyway. Plus I warned her twice and she ignored me both times. She called me heartless. Said I should be more understanding of how upset she is and that I should care more about her stuff than my son apparently. I was busy trying to calm him down because he was still crying from her screaming. My husband told her again that I did warn her and she chose not to listen. Jean left and slammed the door. 2 days later, my husband got a message from her boyfriend Mark saying call me when you can. It's about Jean. My husband put it on speaker. Mark said Jean filed a small claims court case against us. The papers were coming to our address. I felt sick. We don't have money for a lawyer. We're barely making rent with me on leave. Mark said Jean told him she had security camera footage from our house showing us letting the baby destroy her things on purpose. That we were negligent parents. We don't have security cameras. We never have. Mark went quiet. Then he said he wanted to know if that was true before deciding what to do. He had access to Jean's cloud account and saw her typing up a script. A detailed plan of lies for court. She was going to say we encouraged the baby to grab her things. That we laughed when her stuff broke. My husband asked if he'd testify. Mark didn't answer right away. Then he said Jean's in the other room right now, practicing her testimony. He has screenshots of everything. The fake story. Texts where she told her mom she's going to take us for everything even if we end up homeless. The court date is in 9 days. He can send us everything tonight, but if he does, his relationship with Jean is over the second she finds out. My husband looked at me. I looked at the baby sleeping. At our tiny flat we can barely afford. At the bills on the counter. Mark said she just opened the door. I need your answer now. My husband didn't even hesitate. He said, send everything. The line went quiet for maybe 3 seconds. Then Mark said okay and hung up. I sat down on the couch because my legs felt weak. Our son was still sleeping in his bouncer. His little fists curled up near his face. He had no idea his grabbing some sunglasses was about to turn into this whole thing. My phone buzzed about 15 minutes later. It was an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, evidence. I opened it and there were maybe 20 screenshots attached. Text messages between Jean and her sister Valerie, messages to her mom, and this whole document that looked like she'd been working on it for hours. The document was titled Court Testimony Draft, and it was dated the same day the incident happened. She'd started writing it that night. In it, she claimed we'd been drinking before she arrived, that we told her it would be funny to see what the baby would do to her expensive things, that my husband had actually handed the baby the sunglasses and encouraged him to throw them. None of that happened. We hadn't been drinking. We were just sitting there after I'd warned her twice. There were texts to Valerie where Jean wrote, they're broke as fuck, so this is going to destroy them, but I don't care. I want my stuff replaced and they can figure it out. Another text to her mom said, I'm going to make sure they pay me back even if I have to take them to court every month until they're homeless. This is about respect. My husband was reading over my shoulder. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, we need to forward all of this to someone who can help us. The problem was we didn't know anyone who could help us. We don't have a lawyer. We've never needed one. My husband works at a warehouse and I was a receptionist before the baby came. We're not people who have lawyers on speed dial. I called my older brother Damien. He's not a lawyer, but he works in insurance and deals with claim stuff, so I figured he might know something. Damien listened to the whole story, and then he was quiet for a minute. Finally, he said, "You need to file a response to the small claims case and you need to bring all of that evidence Mark sent you." He explained that in small claims court, you don't really need a lawyer. It's designed for regular people to handle smaller disputes. The limit in our area is £5,000, so Jean's £2,300 claim fits. Damien said the key is showing up prepared with evidence and witnesses if you have them. He told me to write down exactly what happened in order, print out the screenshots Mark sent, and bring any other proof we had. The only other proof we had was the warning text I'd sent Jean 2 hours before she came over. I'd texted her, "Just so you know, baby is in a grabbing phase. Might want to leave your nice jewelry and sunglasses at home, haha." She'd responded, "I'm not worried. Babies love me." I screenshotted that conversation and added it to a folder on my laptop with everything Mark had sent. The next morning, we got the official court papers delivered. Jean was suing us for £2,300 in damages, plus £200 in court fees. The court date was exactly 9 days away on a Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. My husband had to request time off work. His manager wasn't happy about it because they were already short-staffed, but he approved it. I spent the next week obsessing over what to wear to court, what to say, how to organize our evidence. Damien helped me put together a binder with tabs. One section for the timeline of what happened, one for the text messages, one for Mark's screenshots of Jean's planned lies. The question was whether Mark would actually show up to testify. We hadn't heard from him again after he sent the evidence. 3 days before the court date, my husband tried calling him. It went straight to voicemail. He sent a text asking if Mark was still willing to help. No response. I started panicking. What if Mark changed his mind? What if Jean found out what he did and convinced him not to testify? Without him, the screenshots were just screenshots. Jean could claim they were fake. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head. The baby woke up twice, and I was almost grateful for the distraction. My husband was awake too. We lay there in the dark, and he said, "Whatever happens tomorrow, we told the truth. That has to count for something." I wanted to believe that. But I've seen enough true crime shows to know that the truth doesn't always win. We dropped the baby off at my mom's house on the way to court. She'd taken the day off work to watch him. She gave me a hug and told me to breathe. The courthouse was this old building downtown with metal detectors at the entrance and security guards who looked bored. We had to empty our pockets and put everything through an X-ray machine. Inside, the hallways were narrow and painted this depressing beige color. There were wooden benches along the walls where people sat waiting. Some of them looked nervous like us. Others looked angry. We found the small claims courtroom on the second floor. It was smaller than I expected. Just a few rows of benches, a table for the plaintiff, a table for the defendant, and the judge's bench at the front. Jean was already there, sitting at her table. She had a leather briefcase open in front of her and was wearing a professional-looking navy dress. Her hair was pulled back, and she had minimal makeup on. She looked put together and serious. She didn't look at us when we walked in. We sat down at our table and I pulled out our binder. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. At exactly 2 o'clock, a bailiff came in and said, "All rise." We stood up and the judge walked in. The judge was a woman probably in her 50s with short gray hair and glasses. She sat down and told us we could sit too. She looked at some papers in front of her and then said, "This is case number 47291, Jean Patricia Holloway versus Naomi Renee Winters and Graham Charles Winters. Miss Holloway, you're the plaintiff, so you'll present your case first." Jean stood up and smoothed her dress. She walked around her table and stood in front of the judge. She started talking in this calm, measured voice that didn't sound anything like the Jean I knew. She explained that she'd come to visit her friends and their new baby, that she was excited to meet the baby and brought gifts. That part was a lie. She didn't bring any gifts. She said that when she arrived, we seemed distracted and tired, that we offered her wine, but she declined because she had to drive home. Another lie. We didn't offer her anything because she'd only planned to stay for like 30 minutes. Jean continued. She said we handed her the baby without any warnings, that the baby immediately grabbed her sunglasses off her head and threw them across the room, breaking them, that the baby then knocked her phone out of her hand and it shattered on our tile floor. She pulled out her broken phone and the broken sunglasses and set them on the table in front of the judge. She said, "These sunglasses were a gift from my late grandmother and they're irreplaceable. The phone contains important work documents and photos that I haven't backed up yet." The defendants refused to take any responsibility even though this happened in their home while their baby was in their care. She sat back down and looked at the judge with this expression that was like sad but also dignified. The judge made some notes and then turned to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters, your response?" My husband stood up first. He's not great at public speaking, and I could see his hands trembling, but his voice came out steady. He said, "Your Honor, that's not what happened. My wife warned Jean twice before she held our son that he grabs things and she should remove her sunglasses. Jean refused and said it was fine. When our son grabbed her sunglasses, she screamed, which scared him, and he accidentally knocked her phone out of her hand. We didn't offer her wine, and she didn't bring any gifts. She's lying about the basic facts." The judge looked at Jean. "Miss Holloway, do you have any evidence that you warned them about your expensive items or that they offered you alcohol?" Jean hesitated for just a second. Then she said, I have my testimony, Your Honor. I'm under oath. The judge wrote something down. Then she said, Mrs. Winters, do you have evidence supporting your version? I stood up and my voice cracked a little when I started talking. I said, yes, Your Honor. I have a text message I sent Jean 2 hours before she came over warning her about our son's grabbing phase. I opened the binder and pulled out the printed screenshot. The bailiff took it from me and handed it to the judge. The judge read it, and her expression didn't change. She said, this shows you warned her via text message. Do you have evidence she received this warning verbally as well? I said, no, Your Honor, but my husband was there. He heard me warn her twice. The judge said, spousal testimony can be biased. Do you have any other witnesses? My heart sank. This was it. This was where we needed Mark. And that's when the courtroom door opened. Mark walked in looking like he hadn't slept in days. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt. He said, sorry I'm late, Your Honor. I'm here to testify. Jean's head whipped around so fast. The look on her face was pure shock and then rage. The judge said, and you are? Mark said, Mark Oliver Brennan. I'm Jean's boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend now, I guess. The judge looked at Jean. Miss Holloway, did you know this witness was coming? Jean's face was red. She said, Your Honor, he has no relevance to this case. He wasn't even there when the incident happened. Mark said, but I was there when you wrote up a fake testimony and planned to commit perjury. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge leaned forward. She said, Mr. Brennan, that's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence? Mark pulled out his phone. He said, I have screenshots of documents Jean created detailing a false version of events. I have text messages where she admits the defendants warned her, but she's going to lie about it in court. And I have messages where she says she wants to financially ruin them. Jean stood up fast. Your Honor, he's lying. He's angry I broke up with him and he's trying to sabotage my case. Mark looked at her and said, you didn't break up with me, Jean. I left you when I found out what you were planning to do to your friends. The judge said, Mr. Brennan, please provide your evidence to the bailiff. Mark handed over his phone. The bailiff took it to the judge and she started scrolling through it. The silence in that courtroom felt like it lasted forever. Jean was staring at Mark with this look of complete betrayal. My husband reached over and squeezed my hand. Finally, the judge looked up. She said, Miss Holloway, these messages appear to show you plan to present false testimony. They include a document where you claim the defendants were drinking and encouraged their child to damage your property. Is this your account that these messages came from? Jean's lawyer face was completely gone. She looked panicked. Your Honor, I can explain. The judge held up her hand. I don't need explanations right now. What I need is honesty. Did you or did you not receive verbal warnings from Mrs. Winters about the baby's behavior before you held him? Jean's mouth opened and closed. Finally, she said very quietly, she might have mentioned something. The judge said she might have mentioned something or she did mention something. Which is it? Jean looked down. She warned me. The judge set down Mark's phone. She said, perjury is a crime, Miss Holloway. Lying under oath is a crime. Based on the evidence presented here today, including your own admission just now, I'm dismissing your case with prejudice. Jean's face went white. The judge continued. That means you cannot refile this same claim. Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential perjury charges. You're ordered to pay the defendant's court costs of £200. This hearing is concluded. She banged her gavel and stood up. The bailiff said, all rise again, and the judge walked out. I couldn't move. My husband was saying something, but I couldn't hear him over the rushing sound in my ears. We won. We actually won. Jean grabbed her briefcase and her broken stuff and rushed out of the courtroom without looking at any of us. Mark stood there for a second, looking exhausted. My husband walked over to him and said, thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough. Mark shook his head. He said, I couldn't let her do that to you. What she was planning was wrong. He looked toward the door where Jean had left. I loved her. I really did. But I can't be with someone who'd destroy people's lives over an accident. I asked if he was okay. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said, I will be. Eventually. He left after that, and we stood there in the empty courtroom holding our binder of evidence we barely got to use. The bailiff came over and handed my husband a form. He said, you'll need to file this to get your court costs reimbursed. Takes about 6 weeks. We thanked him and walked out. In the hallway, we passed a few people waiting for other cases. They looked at us curiously, but we didn't say anything. Outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright. Everything felt surreal. My husband said, we should pick up the baby. We drove to my mom's house, and when we walked in, she took one look at our faces and said, what happened? I started crying. Not sad crying, just like release crying. All the stress from the past week came pouring out. My mom hugged me and my husband explained what happened. She kept saying, oh my God, over and over. The baby was asleep in a playpen in the living room. I picked him up carefully and held him. He made a little noise but didn't wake up. My mom said, so she tried to lie in court and got caught? My husband nodded. He said, her boyfriend showed up with evidence of all her lies. The judge dismissed the whole case. My mom looked relieved. That Mark sounds like a good person. I said, he is. He lost his relationship over this. We stayed at my mom's for dinner. She made pasta and we ate it while the baby sat in his high chair gnawing on a teething toy. Everything felt normal again, like the past week had been some weird nightmare. But that night after we put the baby to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Jean. About how she'd been willing to lie under oath and financially destroy us over an accident she'd been warned about. About how she'd called herself my friend while planning to ruin us. I texted Valerie, Jean's sister. We'd met a few times at gatherings. The text just said, "Hey, I don't know if Jean told you what happened today in court, but I wanted you to hear my side." I didn't expect a response, but one came through about 10 minutes later. Valerie said she called me crying. She said you and Graham humiliated her in court and Mark betrayed her. But honestly, Jean told me weeks ago what she was planning, and I told her it was wrong. She wouldn't listen. I'm sorry she dragged you into this mess. I wrote back, "Thank you for saying that." Valerie responded, "Jean's always been like this. When she doesn't get her way, she escalates. Our mom enables it." I tried to warn Mark when they first started dating, but he thought I was just being a jealous sister. I asked, "Do you think she'll actually get charged with perjury?" Valerie said probably not. They rarely prosecute that stuff unless it's a major case, but it'll be on her record that she tried. We texted back and forth for a while. She told me Jean had already posted on social media about being betrayed by people she trusted. No names, but everyone would know who she meant. I checked Jean's Instagram. Sure enough, there was a long post about fake friends and narcissistic behavior and standing up for yourself even when people try to silence you. The comments were full of support from people who didn't know the real story. Things like, "You deserve better and cut toxic people out of your life, queen." I showed my husband. He said, "Let her have her echo chamber. People who know the truth know the truth." But it bothered me. The idea that Jean was out there playing the victim and people believed her. Damien called the next day to check on us. When we told him what happened, he said, "I knew Mark would come through." He called me yesterday asking advice about how to testify. I said, "Wait, what? You talked to Mark?" Damien said, "Yeah, he found my number somehow," and called asking if he could get in trouble for testifying against his girlfriend. I told him he'd be protected as a witness and that telling the truth is always the right thing. I didn't know Mark had been that scared about coming forward. It made what he did even more meaningful. 2 weeks after the court date, we got a letter from the district attorney's office. It said they'd reviewed the case and decided not to pursue criminal charges against Jean, but that the incident would remain on file. My husband said, "So she gets away with it." I said, "Not really. She lost her boyfriend. She lost us as friends. And anyone who was in that courtroom knows what she tried to do." The court costs refund came through about 5 weeks later. £200 deposited into our account. It wasn't much, but it felt like vindication. Mark reached out once after everything settled. He sent a message saying he'd moved out of the apartment he shared with Jean and was staying with his brother for a while. He said he hoped we were doing okay and that he didn't regret what he did. My husband wrote back telling him if he ever needed anything to let us know. Mark never responded, but I think he appreciated it. Life went back to normal after that. The baby kept grabbing things and we kept warning people. Most of them listened. I ran into Jean one more time about 3 months after the court case. I was at the grocery store pushing the baby in a cart and I turned down the cereal aisle and there she was. We made eye contact and for a second neither of us moved. Then she turned around and walked away without saying anything. Part of me wanted to follow her and ask why. Why she'd been willing to destroy us. Why our friendship meant so little. Why she couldn't just accept that it was an accident. But I didn't. I just stood there watching her disappear around the corner and then I continued my shopping. The baby grabbed a box of crackers off the shelf and I gently took it from his little hands and put it back. He laughed like it was the funniest game in the world. That's the thing about babies. They don't hold grudges. They don't plot revenge. They just grab things and laugh and move on. I wish more adults could do the same. Looking back now, the whole situation feels almost ridiculous. £2,300 over broken sunglasses and a phone. A friendship destroyed. A relationship ended. Court appearances and evidence binders and lies prepared for testimony. All because someone couldn't accept responsibility for ignoring a simple warning. My husband says I should write this whole story down somewhere. That it's one of those things that's so absurd it needs to be documented. So here it is. The time our 6-month-old accidentally broke our friend's expensive stuff after we warned her, and she tried to sue us and commit perjury, but her boyfriend exposed her lies in court. Not exactly the kind of story you tell at dinner parties, but it's ours. The baby is 10 months old now. He's pulling himself up on furniture and getting into everything. We still warn people before they hold him. Most of them listen. Update 1. It's been 4 months since the court case and I thought everything was settled. I was wrong. Last week my husband got a call at work from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer because we've been getting spam calls constantly. But something made him pick up. It was a lawyer. A real one. Not small claims court, but an actual attorney named Patricia Volkov, who said she was representing Jean in a civil lawsuit against us. My husband didn't understand at first. He said, "We already went to court. The case was dismissed." Patricia said, "Yes, I'm aware. My client is now filing a separate lawsuit for emotional distress and defamation of character. You'll be receiving papers within the week." My husband said, "Defamation? We didn't say anything about her." Patricia's voice was cold. She said, "My client has documented evidence of you and your wife spreading malicious lies about her to mutual friends and on social media." She's also claiming emotional distress from the courtroom incident where her ex-boyfriend was allowed to violate her privacy by sharing private communications. The call ended and my husband just sat there in the break room at work trying to process what happened. He called me immediately. I was feeding the baby when my phone rang. When he told me what the lawyer said, I felt like I was going to throw up. I said, "We didn't post anything about her. We didn't tell anyone except my mom and Damien what happened." My husband said, "I know, but Jean's claiming we did." The papers came 3 days later. A process server showed up at our flat at 7 in the morning on Saturday and handed them to my husband at the door. The lawsuit was for £50,000. $50,000. The complaint listed things like severe emotional distress, damage to reputation, loss of income due to damaged reputation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. There were exhibits attached. Screenshots of Facebook posts from people who weren't even at the court case talking about someone who tried to lie under oath. Jean had highlighted comments mentioning sunglasses and an iPhone, claiming people knew it was about her. There were screenshots of Valerie's text messages with me, the ones where she said Jean had always been like this. Jean was claiming I'd manipulated her sister into turning against her. The whole thing was insane. We defended ourselves in court with the truth, and now she was suing us for that. Damien came over that night. He read through the entire complaint twice and his face got darker each time. He said, "This is a SLAP suit." I said, "What's that?" He explained that SLAP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. It's when someone files a lawsuit not because they expect to win, but to punish someone for speaking out or defending themselves, to drain their resources and scare them into silence. He said she knows she'll probably lose this case, but she also knows you can't afford a lawyer to defend it. She's banking on you settling just to make it go away. My husband said, "We can't settle. We don't have that kind of money." Damien said, "You need to respond to the lawsuit regardless. If you don't, she wins by default." We had 30 days to file a response. The problem was we had no idea how to write a legal response to a civil lawsuit. This wasn't small claims where you could just show up and tell your side. I spent that entire weekend researching online. How to respond to a civil complaint. What defamation actually means legally. Whether you can sue someone for emotional distress when you were the one who lied in court. Turns out defamation has really specific requirements. You have to prove the person made a false statement, published it to others, and it caused actual harm. Truth is an absolute defense. If what we said was true, it's not defamation even if it hurt her reputation. But I wasn't a lawyer. I didn't know how to argue that in court. I called my brother again and asked if he knew anyone who could at least look at the lawsuit and tell us if we had a chance. Damien said he'd make some calls. 2 days later, he called back. He'd found a lawyer named Simon Cartwright who sometimes did pro bono work. Damien explained our situation, and Simon agreed to at least review the case. We met him at his office on a Wednesday afternoon. My mom watched the baby. Simon was probably in his 60s with completely white hair and a rumpled suit that looked like he'd worn it for 3 days straight. His office was cluttered with files stacked everywhere. He read through Jean's complaint while we sat there. He didn't say anything for maybe 10 minutes. Just read and made notes on a legal pad. Finally, he looked up and said, "This is textbook. SLAP. She has no case." Relief flooded through me. I said, "So we can get it dismissed?" Simon said, "Eventually, yes. But it'll take time and she knows that. She's hoping to make you suffer through the process." He explained that we'd need to file what's called an anti-SLAP motion. It's a special motion that asks the judge to dismiss the lawsuit early because it's designed to silence protected speech. The catch was we'd need to prove that 1, we were speaking about a matter of public concern, and 2, she couldn't prove she'd likely win her case. Simon said, "Defending yourself in court proceedings is protected. Talking to family members about what happened is protected. She'd have to prove you published false statements with malice, and that's not going to happen based on what you've told me." I asked how much this would cost. We'd been clear with Damien that we had no money for lawyers. Simon leaned back in his chair. He said, "Normally I'd charge around £3,000 to handle this through the anti-SLAP motion, but I hate SLAP suits. They're abusive and they clog up the courts. I'll do it for $1,500. You can pay me in installments if you need to." £1,500 might as well have been $50,000. We didn't have it. My husband asked if we could represent ourselves. Simon said you could, but I wouldn't recommend it. Anti-SLAP motions have specific procedural requirements, and if you miss something, the judge can deny it on technical grounds, even if you're right on the merits. We left his office feeling worse than when we went in. We were being sued for defending ourselves, and we couldn't afford to defend the defense. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed doing math in my head. Our rent was £1,300. Utilities and groceries and the car payment and everything else left us with maybe £200 at the end of each month if we were lucky. We'd have to save for 7 or 8 months to afford Simon. The baby would be over a year old by then. The lawsuit would already be in full swing. My husband said maybe we should just not respond. Let her win and file for bankruptcy. I said we can't do that. This isn't about money anymore. She's trying to ruin us because we told the truth. He said, "I know, but what choice do we have?" I didn't have an answer. The next morning, I was scrolling through Facebook while the baby played on his mat. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but I noticed I had a friend request from someone named Iris Mahoney. I didn't recognize the name, but when I clicked on her profile, I saw she had mutual friends with Jean. I accepted the request out of curiosity. 5 minutes later, Iris sent me a message. It said, "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you, but I heard through the grapevine about what Jean did to you. I went through something similar with her 2 years ago, and I wanted to reach out." I sat up straighter. I wrote back, "What do you mean?" Iris said, "Can I call you?" This is easier to explain over the phone. I gave her my number and she called within minutes. Iris had a soft voice, but she sounded angry underneath it. She said Jean and I were friends for about a year. Everything was fine until I borrowed her dress for a wedding. I got a small stain on it from the venue's terrible coffee setup. I offered to pay for cleaning, but she demanded I buy her a new dress. It was a 500-pound dress. I didn't have that kind of money. I said, "What happened?" Iris said she sued me in small claims court. She claimed I deliberately ruined her dress and that I'd stolen jewelry from her apartment. I never stole anything. But she brought in fake receipts and had her mom testify as a witness. Her mom lied under oath and said she'd seen me take a necklace. My stomach dropped. "Did you win?" Iris said, "No. I lost because I didn't have any evidence and it was my word against 2 of them. The judge ordered me to pay Jean 800 pounds. I had to set up a payment plan and it took me a year to pay it off. I said, "That's horrible." Iris said, "It gets worse." After I paid everything, I ran into Jean's mom at a grocery store. She avoided me, but I followed her and asked her why she lied. She looked uncomfortable and said Jean told her I'd insulted their family and that I deserved to be taught a lesson. I asked, "Did you ever get the money back?" Iris laughed bitterly. "No. I thought about filing an appeal, but I couldn't afford a lawyer. Jean got away with it completely." She continued, "I heard about your court case through Valerie. I know Valerie through work. When she told me Jean had tried to do the same thing to you but got caught, I couldn't believe it. And now I hear she's suing you again?" I said yes. For 50,000 pounds. Iris was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I kept everything from my case. All the paperwork, all the evidence. I have proof that Jean's mom lied because there were security cameras at Jean's apartment building and I requested the footage during our case. It showed I never took anything. But by the time I got the footage, the case was already decided and the judge said I should have presented it earlier." I said, "Would you be willing to testify about that if we go to court?" Iris said, "Absolutely. Jean destroyed my credit for a year over a coffee stain. If I can help stop her from doing it to someone else, I will." I thanked her and we exchanged emails. After we hung up, I called Simon immediately. When I told him about Iris, his whole tone changed. He said, "That's pattern evidence. If we can show Jean has a history of filing frivolous lawsuits and lying in court, it strengthens your anti-SLAPP motion significantly." I said, "But we still can't afford you." Simon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let me make some calls. I have an idea." 2 days later, Simon called back. He'd reached out to the local legal aid society and explained our case. They agreed to provide funding for his fees because SLAPP suits are exactly the kind of abuse they work to prevent. We'd have to pay a small portion, maybe 300 pounds, but the rest would be covered. I cried when he told me. Actual tears of relief. Simon filed our anti-SLAPP motion the following week. It was 30 pages long and included exhibits. Iris's testimony and evidence from her case. Mark's screenshots that we'd used in small claims court. The text message where I'd warned Jean about the baby. Valerie's texts admitting Jean had a pattern of this behavior. We also included declarations from me and my husband describing exactly what happened and what we'd told people afterward. The motion argued that Jean's lawsuit was designed to punish us for defending ourselves in the prior case and that all our statements were protected speech about a judicial proceeding. Jean had 30 days to respond to our motion. Her response came in on day 29. It was only 8 pages and it mostly just repeated the same claims from her original complaint. She said we'd ruined her reputation and caused her severe emotional harm. She included new exhibits though. Screenshots of conversations between Mark and his brother, where Mark said Jean was psychotic and manipulative. She claimed we'd manipulated Mark into saying those things. She also included a letter from a therapist saying Jean was being treated for anxiety and depression related to the court case. The letter didn't say whether the therapist knew the full story. The hearing for our anti-SLAPP motion was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, life was this weird combination of normal and terrifying. I'd be playing with the baby or doing laundry, and then I'd remember we were being sued for 50,000 pounds and my chest would get tight. My husband started having trouble sleeping. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning and I'd find him sitting in the living room just staring at nothing. We didn't tell most people what was happening. It felt too complicated to explain. But word got around anyway. One of my old coworkers from before maternity leave sent me a message asking if everything was okay. She said someone had told her I was in legal trouble. I gave her the short version and she said, "That's insane. Is there anything I can do?" I said no, but thank you. What could anyone do? But then she said, "I work in HR now. If you need a character reference or anything like that, let me know. I'll write you the best reference letter you've ever seen." It was such a small offer, but it made me feel less alone. A week before the hearing, Simon called with an update. He said Jean's lawyer reached out. They want to discuss settlement. My heart rate spiked. I said, We're not paying her anything. Simon said, I know. I told them that. But they're saying if we drop our anti-slap motion, Jean will dismiss her lawsuit and we'll both walk away. I said, absolutely not. We're not dropping the motion. Simon said, I told them the same thing. But here's what's interesting. The fact that they're trying to settle tells me they know they're going to lose. Patricia Volkov is a good lawyer. She wouldn't take a weak case this far unless her client was feeding her lies. He said, my guess is Patricia has now done actual discovery and realized Jean doesn't have evidence for her claims. She's trying to get out before the judge sanctions them. I asked what sanctions meant. Simon explained that if a judge finds a lawsuit is frivolous or filed in bad faith, they can order the person who filed it to pay the other side's legal fees. And in some cases, they can fine the lawyer too. He said, I'm going to push for sanctions if we win this motion. Jean needs to face consequences or she'll keep doing this to people. The hearing was on a Thursday morning at 9. Simon told us we didn't have to be there, but we went anyway. The courtroom was different from the small claims one. Bigger, more formal. The judge's bench was elevated higher and everything felt more intimidating. Jean was there with Patricia. She looked different than the last time I'd seen her. Thinner. Her hair was darker, like she'd dyed it. She was wearing a gray suit and kept her eyes down. Patricia stood up when the judge came in. She was probably in her 40s. Very polished, with perfect posture. The judge was a man this time. Judge Reynard. He had a reputation, according to Simon, for hating frivolous lawsuits. Judge Reynard started by saying, I've reviewed the motion and the response. Miss Volkov, your client's claims appear to be based entirely on statements the defendants made to family members about a prior court proceeding. Can you explain how that constitutes defamation? Patricia said, Your Honor, the defendant's statements went beyond simply discussing the case. They made malicious characterizations about my client's mental state and credibility. They influenced her ex-boyfriend to violate her privacy, and they've caused measurable harm to her reputation. Judge Reynard said, the ex-boyfriend testified in court about evidence he personally observed. That's not manipulation, that's testimony. And statements made to family members about a case are protected speech unless they're provably false. Patricia said, We believe we can prove falsity at trial. Judge Reynard looked skeptical. He said, Miss Volkov, your client lost the underlying case because the judge found she'd planned to commit perjury. Now she's suing the people she lied about for defending themselves. Do you see the problem here? Patricia opened her mouth, but Judge Reynard held up his hand. He said, I've seen this pattern before. Plaintiff files a weak case, loses, then files a retaliatory lawsuit hoping the defendants can't afford to fight back. It's abusive process and I won't allow it. He looked at his notes. The anti-slap motion is granted. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Miss Holloway is ordered to pay the defendants reasonable attorney fees and costs. Additionally, I'm sanctioning Miss Holloway personally in the amount of £5,000 for filing a frivolous lawsuit, payable to the court. Jean made a sound like a gasp. Patricia put her hand on Jean's arm. Judge Reynard continued, Miss Volkov, I'm not sanctioning you because I believe your client misrepresented the facts to you, but I'd encourage you to be more careful about the clients you take on. Patricia's face was bright red. She said, Yes, Your Honor. Judge Reynard said, This hearing is concluded and banged his gavel. We sat there stunned. Simon was writing notes. Jean and Patricia left quickly without looking at us. In the hallway, Simon said that went as well as it possibly could have. You'll get your fees back and Jean has to pay a penalty on top of that. I said, Will she actually pay? Simon said, If she doesn't, we can put a lien on her assets. We'll get it eventually. We drove home in a daze. It felt unreal. After months of stress and fear, it was just over. Finished. My husband said, I can't believe she tried to do this to us. I said, I can. She's been doing it to people for years, apparently. When we picked up the baby from my mom's, she looked at our faces and said, You won? I said, We won. My mom hugged us both. She said, Thank God. I've been worried sick. That night, after the baby was asleep, my husband opened a bottle of cheap wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. We sat on our ratty couch in our tiny flat and drank it. He said, Do you think she's done now? I said, I hope so. But with Jean, who knows? 3 weeks later, we got a check from Patricia's office for £2,800. Our attorney fees plus costs. Simon's bill had actually been covered by legal aid, but the court didn't know that. Simon gave us the whole amount. He said, Use it for the baby. Buy him something nice. We put it in savings instead. Because with everything that had happened, we'd learned, you never know when you'll need emergency money. The £5,000 sanction Jean owed to the court had to be paid within 60 days or she'd face additional penalties. I didn't follow up on whether she paid it. I didn't want to think about Jean anymore. But about a month after the hearing, Valerie texted me. She said, Thought you'd want to know Jean got fired from her job. I asked why. Valerie said her boss found out about the court case and the sanctions. Apparently lying in court is a bad look when you work in client relations. Who knew? I felt a tiny bit of satisfaction. Not happiness at someone losing their job, but satisfaction that actions had consequences. Iris reached out to me after she heard about our win. She said, I'm so glad you guys fought back. I wish I had. I told her, you did what you could with what you had. That's all anyone can do. She said, I'm thinking about trying to reopen my case. If I can prove Jean's mom lied, maybe I can get my money back. I said Simon might be able to help you. He really hates these kinds of cases. Iris said she'd reach out to him. I hope she did. Looking back, the whole thing feels like a nightmare. We were just trying to live our lives with our baby and somehow got sucked into this legal battle that cost us months of peace and money we didn't have. But we also found out that people like Simon exist. And Iris. And even Mark, who gave up his relationship to tell the truth. The baby is almost a year old now. He's walking and getting into everything. We still warn people about his grabbing, but it's less urgent now because he's learned the word no, even if he doesn't always listen to it. Sometimes when he grabs something he shouldn't, I think about Jean and her stupid Gucci sunglasses. How something so small spiraled into something so massive. And I think about how lucky we are that we had people who helped us. Because without Damien and Simon and Iris and Mark and even Valerie, we would have been buried by Jean's vindictiveness. My husband says maybe we should write a guide for people dealing with slap suits. Something simple that explains what they are and how to fight them. I told him maybe we should. Because the legal system is terrifying when you don't understand it, and people like Jean count on that fear. For now, though, we're just living our life. The lawsuit is over. The drama is done. We have our little family and our tiny flat, and that's enough. Jean tried to destroy us twice and failed both times. That's the real ending to this story. Update 2. It's been 7 months since the anti-slap hearing, and I really thought we were done with Jean forever. I was wrong again. Last month, my husband got a call from his manager asking him to come into the office for a meeting. My husband works warehouse logistics. He's been at the same company for 5 years, and his manager, Trevor, has always been pretty chill. But Trevor's voice on the phone sounded weird. Formal. He said, "We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to HR's attention." My husband asked what concerns. Trevor said, "It's better if we talk in person." My husband came home from that meeting looking shell-shocked. He sat down on the couch and didn't say anything for a full minute. Finally, I said, "What happened?" He said someone filed a complaint with HR claiming I've been harassing them online. I felt cold all over. Who? He said they wouldn't tell me the name. But HR showed me screenshots of messages allegedly sent from my Facebook account to someone's work email, threatening messages about legal action and calling them names. I said, "You didn't send those." He said, "I know I didn't send them." I told HR that, but the messages came from my account. They have my profile picture and everything. He showed me the screenshots HR had printed out. The messages were vile, calling someone a lying bitch and threatening to sue them for everything they had, saying they'd make sure this person never worked again. The Facebook profile was definitely my husband's. Same name, same profile picture from our wedding, but he never sent those messages. I said, "Someone hacked your account." My husband said, "That's what I told HR, but they said they have to investigate and I'm on administrative leave until it's resolved." Administrative leave meant no pay. We couldn't afford for him to miss even one paycheck. That night I went through his Facebook account. His password was still the same one he'd been using for years. I changed it immediately and checked the login activity. There were logins from devices we didn't own. An iPhone logged in from an IP address in a different part of the city. Android tablet logins. Someone had definitely been accessing his account. I screenshot everything and sent it to Trevor. I explained that my husband's account had been compromised and whoever filed the complaint was likely the person who hacked the account. Trevor responded the next morning. He said HR needs to complete their investigation. The leave stands for now. I asked my husband who he thought would do this. He looked at me and we both said Jean at the same time. But how would we prove it? I called Simon. He'd become something like our lawyer on retainer at this point, even though we weren't paying him. He seemed personally invested in making sure Jean didn't get away with anything. When I explained what happened, Simon said, "If it's her, she's escalating. This isn't just civil harassment anymore. Hacking someone's account and using it to send threatening messages could be criminal." He said, "You need to file a police report and you need to document everything. Save those login records. Screenshot every fake message. If you can prove someone accessed his account without permission, that's unauthorized access to a computer system." We filed a police report that afternoon. The officer who took our statement seemed skeptical at first. But when I showed him the login records and explained the history with Jean, his expression changed. He said, "You're saying this woman has previously sued you twice and lost both times?" I said, "Yes, and she's shown a pattern of retaliatory behavior." The officer said, "We'll open an investigation. But I'll be honest, these cases are hard to prove. Unless we can directly tie her to the hacked account, it's mostly circumstantial." I said, "What if we can prove she had motive and opportunity?" He said, "Then we have a better case." The next day, I went through all our old records. Every text, every email, every court document. I made a timeline of everything Jean had done, starting from the baby grabbing her sunglasses up through the slap suit. I also reached out to Iris and asked if she'd be willing to provide a statement about her experience with Jean. She said yes immediately. But the smoking gun came from someone I didn't expect. Valerie. Valerie called me out of nowhere and said, "I need to tell you something about Jean, but you can't let her know I told you." I said, "Okay." Valerie said, "Jean's been staying at my apartment for the past 2 months. She lost her job and couldn't afford her place anymore. I felt bad for her because she's my sister, so I let her move into my spare room." I said, "Okay." Valerie continued, She's been on her laptop constantly, always secretive about what she's doing. Last week I borrowed her laptop because mine died and I needed to check my email. She'd left Facebook open. My heart started pounding. And, Valerie said, she was logged into multiple fake accounts, but she also had your husband's Facebook open, just sitting there in a tab like she'd been using it. I said, can you prove that? Did you take pictures? Valerie said, better. I took screenshots and I recorded a video on my phone showing the browser tabs and the URL bar. You can see the timestamp and everything. I said, Valerie, that's evidence of a crime. Valerie said, I know. That's why I'm calling. Jean is my sister and I love her, but I can't keep covering for her when she's doing illegal shit. This has gone too far. She sent me the screenshots and video within the hour. It clearly showed Jean's laptop with multiple browser tabs open, including one logged into my husband's Facebook account. I forwarded everything to Simon and the police officer handling our case. Simon called me back within an hour. He was excited. He said, this is huge. This is direct evidence. If Valerie is willing to testify, we can probably get criminal charges filed. I said she is. She already said she would. The police investigation moved faster after that. The officer reached out to Facebook's legal team with a subpoena for the login data on my husband's account. It took 2 weeks, but they eventually provided records showing that the unauthorized logins came from Jean's IP address. The officer called us and said, we have enough for charges. I'm bringing this to the DA. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and decided to file charges for unauthorized access to a computer system and identity theft. Both were felonies. Jean was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I know because Valerie texted me. She said cops just came and took Jean. She's screaming about how this is a setup. I felt weird about it. Relief mixed with something like sadness. Because at one point, Jean had been my friend. We'd hung out, laughed together, and now she was being arrested because she couldn't let go of an accident. My husband's work reinstated him after the police confirmed the messages weren't from him. Trevor apologized and said HR had to follow protocol. My husband got back pay for the time he'd been on leave. Jean's arraignment was scheduled for 2 weeks after her arrest. She posted bail, £10,000, which shocked me because I didn't think she had that kind of money. Turned out her mom paid it. Simon explained that we could file a civil lawsuit against Jean for the damages caused by her harassment, lost wages, emotional distress, legal fees. I said, will that make us as bad as her? Suing someone who's already facing criminal charges? Simon said no, because you have real damages. She cost your husband his income and caused you both significant stress. That's not frivolous. That's accountability. We decided to wait and see how the criminal case played out first. The preliminary hearing was held 6 weeks after Jean's arrest. Both sides present their evidence and the judge decides if there's enough to proceed to trial. The prosecution presented the Facebook login records, Valerie's testimony and screenshots, the threatening messages sent to my husband's workplace, and testimony from me and my husband about Jean's pattern of harassment. Jean's public defender tried to argue that someone else could have used Jean's IP address, that Valerie was lying to help us, that the evidence was circumstantial. But the judge wasn't buying it. She said, the preponderance of evidence suggests the defendant accessed the victim's account without authorization and used it to send threatening communications to his employer. This case will proceed to trial. Jean's trial date was set for 4 months out. We were told we'd likely have to testify. In the meantime, life continued in this weird limbo. My husband went back to work, but he was jumpy. Every time HR called him for anything, he'd panic thinking it was another complaint. I started having trouble sleeping again. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning with my brain spinning through worst-case scenarios. What if Jean wasn't convicted? What if she escalated even more? The baby was completely oblivious to all of it. He turned 1-year-old and we had a small party with my family. He smashed cake into his face and laughed. It was the first genuinely happy moment we'd had in months. 2 months before Jean's trial was supposed to start, Simon called with news. Jean's lawyer had reached out about a plea deal. The DA was offering a deal where Jean would plead guilty to 1 count of unauthorized computer access, a misdemeanor instead of a felony, in exchange for 18 months probation and mandatory mental health counseling. She'd also have to pay restitution for my husband's lost wages and formally agree to have no contact with us for 5 years. Simon said, it's up to you whether you think that's enough. My husband said, will she have a criminal record? Simon said, yes. A misdemeanor conviction stays on your record. I said, what if she violates the no contact order? Simon said, then it's an automatic probation violation and she'd likely go to jail. We talked about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to see her go to trial and face the full felony charges, but another part of me just wanted this to be over. My husband finally said, let's take the deal. I don't want to spend another 4 months waiting for trial and then potentially appeals after that. I just want to be done. I agreed. Simon informed the DA that we were okay with the plea agreement. Jean's plea hearing was on a Wednesday morning. We didn't have to be there, but Simon suggested we show up. He said, it's good for her to see that you're not scared, that she didn't win. So we went. Jean was already there with her public defender when we walked in. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a plain black dress that looked too big for her. When she saw us, she looked away quickly. The judge came in and explained the plea agreement. He asked Jean if she understood what she was agreeing to. Jean said, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge said, "Do you admit that on the dates specified you accessed Graham Winters' Facebook account without his permission and used it to send threatening messages to his employer?" Jean hesitated. Her lawyer whispered something to her. Finally, Jean said very quietly, "Yes." The judge accepted her plea and sentenced her according to the agreement. 18 months probation, mandatory counseling, restitution of £1,200 for lost wages, and a 5-year no-contact order. He said, "Miss Holloway, if you violate any terms of this agreement, you will serve the maximum jail time for the original charges. Do you understand?" Jean said, "Yes, Your Honor." And that was it. She was escorted out by her lawyer and we never even made eye contact. Outside the courthouse, Simon said, "It's done. She can't legally contact you or come near you for 5 years. If she does, call the police immediately." I asked, "Do you think she'll actually stop?" Simon said, "I think she doesn't have a choice anymore. She has a criminal record now. Any future legal action she tries to take against you will be seen through that lens. No lawyer will touch her cases and no judge will take her seriously." We drove home in silence. My husband reached over and took my hand. He said, "It's really over?" I said, "I think so." The restitution payments started coming in monthly installments. £100 a month automatically deposited into our account. It wasn't much, but it was something. We used the first payment to buy the baby new clothes. He'd grown out of everything. Life slowly started feeling normal again. My husband stopped jumping every time his phone rang. I started sleeping through the night. 3 months after the plea agreement, I was at the grocery store with the baby. I was in the produce section trying to find decent apples when I looked up and saw Jean at the other end of the aisle. She was with an older woman I assumed was her mom. They were looking at bananas. Jean saw me at the exact same moment. We both froze. I could have walked away, could have just turned around and left, but something made me stay. Jean said something to her mom and started walking toward me. Not fast, not threatening, just walking. I put my hand on the shopping cart handle and waited. She stopped about 6 feet away, close enough to talk, but far enough to not violate the no-contact order technically. She said, "I'm not supposed to talk to you." I didn't say anything. Jean looked at the baby in the cart. He was gnawing on a teething ring and completely unaware of the tension. She said, "He's gotten big." I said, "Yeah." There was a long pause. Jean looked down at her hands. Then she said, "I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting that." I said, "What?" She said, "I'm sorry. For all of it. The lawsuit, the harassment, everything. I was angry and I handled it wrong." I said, "You think?" Jean winced. She said, "I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I've been in therapy and I'm working on why I reacted the way I did. It doesn't excuse it, but I wanted you to know I regret it." Part of me wanted to tell her exactly how much she'd hurt us, how many nights I couldn't sleep, how scared my husband had been of losing his job, how our baby's first year had been overshadowed by legal battles. But I was tired, so tired of being angry. I said, "Okay." Jean said, "Okay?" I said, "Yeah. Okay. You're sorry. I heard you. Now leave us alone." Jean nodded. She walked back to her mom and they left the produce section. I stood there for a minute, just breathing. The baby made a noise and held out his teething ring to me. I took it and kissed his forehead. When I got home, I told my husband what happened. He said, "Do you believe her?" I said, "I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. She apologized and she's leaving us alone. That's all I wanted." 4 months after that, Iris texted me. She said, "I took your advice and reached out to Simon. He's helping me file a motion to reopen my case against Jean. We're using Jean's criminal conviction as evidence that she has a pattern of fraud." I said, "That's amazing. I hope you get your money back." Iris said, "Even if I don't, it'll feel good to make her face what she did." I understood that. Looking back now, almost a year since the baby grabbed those sunglasses, the whole thing feels surreal. It started with such a simple accident and spiraled into court cases and criminal charges, and a year of our lives consumed by legal drama. But we made it through. My husband kept his job. We kept our apartment. We kept our little family intact. And Jean has to live with the consequences of her choices. A criminal record, probation, court-ordered therapy, lost friendships and family relationships. Sometimes I wonder if she really meant her apology or if it was just part of her therapy homework. But honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. The baby is 16 months old now. He's running and climbing and getting into everything. Yesterday, he grabbed my phone while I was trying to take a picture of him and threw it across the room. The screen didn't break. And I just laughed and picked him up. Because sometimes things break, and it's nobody's fault. It's just life, and you clean up the mess and move on. Unless you're Jean, apparently. Then you file lawsuits and hack Facebook accounts and end up with a criminal record. But that's her story now, not ours. Ours is just a normal family with a toddler who grabs things and 2 parents who are trying their best. And that's exactly how I want it to be. Update 3. It's been almost 2 years since everything started with Jean. I honestly thought we'd never hear about her again after that grocery store encounter. Last week proved me wrong. I was at home with the baby, who's now 2.5, when there was a knock on our door around 3 in the afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, but sometimes our neighbor drops off packages that get misdelivered. I opened the door and there was a woman I didn't recognize standing there. She was probably in her 30s, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater. She said, "Are you Naomi Winters?" I said, "Yes, who are you?" She said, "My name is Christine Decker. I'm a journalist working on a story about frivolous lawsuits and slap suits in our area. Your case against Jean Holloway came up in my research and I was hoping to interview you." I just stared at her. Finally, I said, "How did you find my address?" Christine looked uncomfortable. "Court records are public. I know this is intrusive and I apologize, but I think your story is important." I said, "I'm not interested," and started to close the door. Christine said, "Jean is suing someone else. Another friend. She's doing the same thing she did to you." I stopped. "What?" Christine said, "Can I come in? I have information I think you'll want to see." Against my better judgment, I let her in. The baby was watching cartoons and barely looked up when Christine sat down on our couch. Christine pulled out a laptop and opened a folder full of documents. She said 3 months ago, Jean filed a lawsuit against a former coworker named Bryn Sato. The lawsuit claims Bryn destroyed Jean's professional reputation by spreading lies about her at their workplace. I said, "Is it another slap suit?" Christine said, "That's what Bryn's lawyer thinks. But Bryn can't afford to fight it. She's a single mom working 2 jobs. Jean's demanding £35,000. I felt sick. I said, "How did you find out about this?" Christine said Bryn reached out to me after reading an article I wrote about abusive litigation tactics. She told me her story and I started digging. That's when I found your case and Iris Mahoney's case. Jean has filed 6 lawsuits in the past 4 years, all against friends or acquaintances, all for amounts the defendants couldn't afford. 6 lawsuits. 6 people she tried to destroy. I said, "She has a criminal conviction for what she did to us. How is she still filing lawsuits?" Christine said, "Criminal conviction doesn't prevent you from filing civil suits. And most judges don't look at someone's full litigation history unless it's brought to their attention." Jean's betting that her targets won't be able to afford lawyers to expose her pattern. I asked, "What do you want from me?" Christine said, "I want to write an article exposing what she's doing, but I need people to go on record. You, Iris, Bryn, and the 3 other victims I've found. If we can show the pattern publicly, it makes it much harder for her to keep doing this." I said, "I need to talk to my husband." Christine gave me her card and left. I spent the rest of the afternoon feeling anxious and angry. Angry that Jean was still doing this. Angry that I wasn't free of her even after 2 years. When my husband got home from work, I showed him the information Christine had left. He read through it and his jaw got tighter with each page. Finally, he said, "We should do the interview." I said, "Are you sure? Going public means our names will be out there connected to all of this." He said, "Our names are already in court documents that anyone can find. At least this way we're controlling the narrative, and maybe we stop her from doing this to someone else." I called Christine the next day and agreed to the interview. She came over that weekend with a photographer. We spent 3 hours talking about everything that had happened with Jean. The photographer took pictures of us in our living room with the baby playing in the background. Christine said, "I want to show that you're real people, with a real life that Jean tried to disrupt." Over the next 2 weeks, Christine interviewed Iris and 3 other people who'd been sued by Jean. All of them had similar stories. Small disputes that Jean escalated into lawsuits. Demands for money they couldn't pay. Threats and harassment when they fought back. One woman named Kendra had been sued because she'd given Jean's dog a haircut Jean didn't like. Jean demanded £5,000, claiming the dog was now traumatized and needed behavioral therapy. Kendra had paid $2,000 just to make it go away, even though she'd done nothing wrong. Another guy named Malcolm had been sued for £7,000 after he accidentally scratched Jean's car door in a parking lot. He'd offered to pay for the repair, which was estimated at £400. Jean sued for emotional distress and loss of vehicle value. Malcolm had to file bankruptcy. The pattern was clear. Jean targeted people who couldn't afford lawyers, people who were living paycheck to paycheck. She'd demand inflated amounts and then either win by default when they didn't respond or force them into settlements. Christine's article was published 3 weeks later in the local newspaper and online. The headline was, "The Serial Litigant: How One Woman Has Weaponized Small Claims Court Against Friends." The article included all 6 cases with dates, court documents, and interviews. It had photos of me and my husband, Iris, Bryn, Kendra, and Malcolm. Christine had even tracked down Mark, Jean's ex, who gave a statement about the fake testimony document. The article went viral locally. Within 2 days, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. People were commenting about their own experiences with frivolous lawsuits. Local lawyers were weighing in about slap suits and how to fight them. And then the news stations picked it up. A reporter from the local TV station called asking if we'd be willing to do an on-camera interview. My husband said no immediately. He said, "We've said what we needed to say. We're not turning this into a media circus." But Bryn did go on TV. She talked about being a single mom struggling to pay bills while Jean demanded money for hurt feelings. The interviewer asked what she wanted people to know, and Bryn said, "I want people to know that our legal system can be weaponized against regular people and we need better protections." The story got picked up by regional news and then by a national morning show. They did a segment on slap suits and used Jean's cases as the example. Jean's face wasn't shown. They blurred it out for legal reasons, but her name was used. Anyone who searched for her would find the articles. 2 weeks after the article published, Simon called me. He said, "You need to hear this." Bryn's lawyer filed the article as evidence in her case against Jean. The judge read it and dismissed Jean's lawsuit. Not only that, the judge issued an order requiring Jean to get court approval before filing any new lawsuits for the next 5 years. I said, "Can they do that?" Simon said yes. It's rare, but when someone shows a clear pattern of abusive litigation, judges can impose filing restrictions. Jean basically can't sue anyone without first convincing a judge that the case has merit. I felt this wave of relief. "So she's really stopped now?" Simon said, "as stopped as she'll ever be." But the consequences for Jean went beyond just the court order. Her name was now permanently associated with frivolous lawsuits. Any employer who Googled her would find the articles. Any future landlord. Any potential friend or dating partner. Valerie texted me about a month after the article came out. She said Jean moved back in with our parents. She can't find work and she's basically become a hermit. Mom's enabler, my dad, but even he's getting fed up. I asked if Jean had said anything about the article. Valerie said she claims she's the victim, that you all conspired against her and the journalist was biased. She's convinced she did nothing wrong. That didn't surprise me. People like Jean never accept responsibility. But here's the thing that happened that I didn't expect. Other people started reaching out. Not just people Jean had sued, but people in similar situations with other serial litigants. A woman named Portia emailed me through Christine. She said her former business partner was suing her for the 4th time in 3 years and she didn't know what to do. I connected her with Simon, who gave her advice on filing an anti-slap motion. A man named Trevor, different Trevor than my husband's manager, called me after getting my number from Iris. He said his ex-wife was filing false restraining orders against him to interfere with custody. I gave him resources about legal aid and documented harassment. Suddenly, I was getting messages from strangers asking for help or advice or just someone who understood. It was overwhelming, but also felt purposeful. Like maybe all the hell we'd been through with Jean had some meaning if it helped other people. My husband wasn't as comfortable with it. He said, "We're not lawyers. We shouldn't be giving people legal advice." I said, "I'm not giving legal advice. I'm just telling them what worked for us and connecting them with resources." He said, "I just don't want you getting pulled back into all of this. We've moved on." He was right. We had moved on. The baby was in preschool now. My husband got a promotion at work. I'd gone back part-time to my old receptionist job. Life was normal and good, but I couldn't ignore the messages. These were people going through what we'd been through, and they felt alone. So I started a blog. Nothing fancy. Just a simple website where I documented our experience with Jean and provided resources for people dealing with slap suits or frivolous lawsuits. I included links to legal aid organizations, templates for filing responses, and explanations of anti-slap laws. I called it When Friends Sue: Surviving Frivolous Litigation. Within 3 months, the blog had over 10,000 views. People were sharing it in legal forums and support groups. Lawyers were linking to it as a resource for their clients. Christine wrote a follow-up article about the blog and about how our story had created this ripple effect of people fighting back against abusive litigation. The craziest part was when a state legislator reached out. Her name was Diane Rojas, and she said she was working on legislation to strengthen anti-slap protections in our state. She wanted to use our case as an example in her proposal. We met with her at her office in the Capitol. She was this energetic woman in her 50s who clearly gave a shit about the issue. She said people like Jean Holloway are rare, but they do significant damage. We need laws that shut them down faster and punish them harder. Her proposed bill would make it easier to file anti-slap motions, require courts to award attorney fees automatically if the motion was granted, and create a registry of people who'd been found to file frivolous lawsuits repeatedly. The bill was introduced 6 months later. We were asked to testify at a committee hearing. I'd never been to the state capitol building before. It was huge and intimidating with marble floors and oil paintings of dead politicians on every wall. The hearing room was set up like a small auditorium with the legislators sitting at a raised desk and witnesses sitting at a table below them. Christine was there taking notes. Simon came to support us. Iris and Bryn testified too. When it was my turn, I walked up to the microphone and my hands were shaking. I'd prepared a statement, but when I started talking, I went off script. I said 2 years ago my 6-month-old baby grabbed my friend's sunglasses and accidentally broke them. That accident turned into months of court battles, thousands of pounds in legal fees we couldn't afford, and criminal harassment that almost cost my husband his job. It happened because our legal system makes it too easy for people to weaponize lawsuits as punishment. This bill won't stop every bad actor, but it'll make it harder for them to succeed. That matters. The legislators asked questions. One of them, an older man who looked skeptical, said, "How do we balance protecting people from frivolous lawsuits with protecting people's right to access the courts?" Simon, who was there as an expert witness, answered that one. He said access to courts is important, but so is protecting people from abusive process. This bill includes safeguards to ensure legitimate cases aren't impacted. It specifically targets patterns of behavior, not isolated disputes. The bill passed out of committee and went to the full legislature. It took 8 months of lobbying and revisions, but it eventually passed. The governor signed it into law on a Tuesday morning in March. Diane invited us to the signing ceremony. We stood in the back of the room with about 50 other people while the governor gave a speech about protecting citizens from legal abuse. When he signed the bill, Diane looked back at us and smiled. Afterward, she came over and said, "You guys did this. Your story made this possible." I said, "We just told the truth about what happened to us." She said, "Sometimes that's all it takes." The law went into effect 6 months later. In the first year, it was used to dismiss over 200 SLAPP suits across the state. People who couldn't afford lawyers before now had a clear path to defend themselves. And the registry Diane had pushed for? Jean's name was on it. Anyone filing a lawsuit in our state could search the registry and see if the other party had a history of frivolous litigation. Judges could see it too. Jean tried to sue the state to get her name removed from the registry. She claimed it violated her rights. The lawsuit was dismissed within a week under the new anti-SLAPP law. The judge called her lawsuit a perfect example of why this registry exists. I heard about that from Valerie, who'd mostly stopped communicating with Jean by that point. Valerie said, "She's miserable and bitter and blames everyone but herself. Our parents finally told her she needs to move out and get help." I didn't feel happy about Jean's situation. I didn't feel anything, really. She was just someone from our past now. Someone who'd caused a lot of pain but ultimately hadn't won. The blog I'd started kept growing. I brought on Iris as a co-writer, and we expanded it to cover other types of legal bullying. We interviewed people. We shared resources. We even started a small fund to help people afford anti-SLAPP lawyers, funded by donations from readers. It wasn't much. Maybe a few £1,000s a year, but it helped a handful of people who otherwise would have been crushed by legal fees. My husband eventually made peace with my involvement in all of it. He said, "I get why you're doing this, but promise me you won't let it take over our lives again." I promised. Life continued. The baby, who we really need to stop calling the baby since he's almost 3 now, started asking questions about why mommy spends time on the computer writing. I told him I help people who are having problems. He said, "Like a superhero?" I said, "Not really. More like a friend who's been through something hard and wants to help other people going through the same thing." He thought about that and then went back to playing with his trucks. A few months ago, I got an email from someone named Rachel Torres. She said, "I'm writing a book about SLAPP suits and abusive process in the American legal system. I'd like to include your story. Would you be willing to talk?" I forwarded the email to my husband. He said, "It's up to you." I thought about it for a few days. Then I responded to Rachel and said yes. We did several hours of interviews over Zoom. Rachel was thorough and asked hard questions. She wanted to know how the experience had affected our marriage, our mental health, our finances, our trust in the legal system. I answered honestly. I told her there were nights I still woke up anxious, that sometimes I'd see someone who looked like Jean in public and my heart would race, that my husband still got tense whenever he got called into a meeting at work. But I also told her about the good that came from it, the people we'd helped, the law that got passed, the awareness that had been raised. Rachel's book came out last year. It's called Legal Warfare: How Frivolous Lawsuits Destroy Lives. Our story is Chapter 4. The book got reviewed in major publications and Rachel did a book tour. She invited us to an event at a bookstore downtown. We went and listened to her read excerpts and answer questions. Someone in the audience asked, "What happened to Jean Holloway?" Rachel looked at us before answering. Then she said, "Jean is facing the consequences of her actions. She has a criminal record, a court filing restriction, and her name on a public registry. She's unable to continue the behavior that defined her for years. But more importantly, her victims found justice and are helping others do the same." After the event, a young woman approached me. She said, "I read your chapter. My roommate is threatening to sue me over damage to her furniture that her own cat caused. I can't afford a lawyer and I've been terrified. But reading your story made me realize I can fight back." I gave her information about legal aid and the blog. She thanked me with tears in her eyes. Driving home that night, my husband said, "Do you regret any of it? If you could go back and never open the door when Jean came over that day, would you?" I thought about it. The stress and fear and anger, the court battles and sleepless nights, the money and time and energy we'd spent. But I also thought about the people we'd helped, the law that got passed, the awareness that existed now that didn't exist before. I said no, I wouldn't change it. Because if it didn't happen to us, it would have happened to someone else. And maybe they wouldn't have had the support system we had. Maybe Jean would still be out there destroying people's lives. He reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for." I said, "We're stronger than we gave ourselves credit for." It's been almost 3 years now since the baby grabbed those sunglasses. 3 years since Jean screamed and set off a chain of events that would consume our lives for months and change them forever. We're okay now. Better than okay. We have our little family. We have jobs and a home and friends who stood by us. We have a purpose that came from pain. And Jean? Last I heard, she was working at a call center and living with her elderly parents. She's not on social media anymore. She doesn't file lawsuits. She exists in obscurity, which is probably exactly where she belongs. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about us, if she thinks about the baby who grabbed her sunglasses and how she let that small moment spiral into something that destroyed her life. But mostly I don't think about her at all. She's a character in a story we survived, a cautionary tale we share with others, a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. Our son is starting kindergarten next year. He's excited about riding the school bus. He still grabs things, but now he understands when we say no. He's learning boundaries and consequences in ways that Jean never did. Last week, he came home from preschool and said my friend took my toy and I was mad. But I didn't hit him. I used my words. I said, "I'm proud of you." He said, "When people make you mad, you're supposed to talk about it, not hit or yell." I said, "That's exactly right. If only more adults understood that. If only Jean had understood that." But she didn't, and we paid the price, and now we're helping others avoid paying that same price. About 6 months after Rachel's book came out, I got an unexpected email. The subject line said, "Former colleague of Jean Holloway." The email was from someone named Tessa Vaughn. She wrote that she'd worked with Jean at the boutique job Jean had before getting fired. Tessa said she'd read Rachel's book and recognized Jean immediately, even though Rachel had used a pseudonym in the published version. Tessa wrote that Jean had tried to sue her too. After Jean got fired from the boutique, she claimed Tessa had stolen commissions that belonged to her. Tessa had proof she hadn't, but Jean filed a lawsuit anyway, demanding £4,000. The lawsuit was still pending when Tessa emailed me. She'd been fighting it for 8 months. She'd spent £3,000 on a lawyer and was running out of money. I called her that same day. Tessa sounded exhausted on the phone. She said, "I don't understand why she's doing this. I was nice to her when everyone else at work couldn't stand her." I said, "That's probably why. Jean targets people she thinks won't fight back." Tessa said, "But I am fighting back. It's just costing me everything." I asked if her lawyer knew about Jean's history and the registry. Tessa said, "What registry?" She didn't know. Her lawyer apparently hadn't checked. I explained the whole thing and sent her links to the registry and the new anti-SLAPP law. I told her to have her lawyer file an anti-SLAPP motion immediately. Tessa called me back 2 days later crying. She said, "My lawyer looked at everything you sent. He said we can probably get the whole case dismissed within a month. He said if he'd known about Jean's history, he never would have let it drag on this long." I felt angry on her behalf, angry that another person had been put through this, angry that Jean was still trying, even with all the restrictions in place. Tessa's case was dismissed 3 weeks later. The judge ordered Jean to pay Tessa's legal fees of £3,200. Jean filed a motion to reconsider. It was denied. She filed an appeal. It was denied. Every single filing Jean made had to be approved by a judge first because of her restrictions. And every single judge who looked at her history denied her motions. Tessa joined our blog as a contributor after her case ended. She wrote about her experience and included practical advice for people dealing with the early stages of frivolous lawsuits. The three of us, me and Iris and Tessa, became close. We'd video chat every few weeks to talk about the blog and cases we were helping with. Sometimes we'd just vent about our experiences or laugh about the absurdity of it all. Iris had finally gotten her money back from Jean through a reopened case. It took almost 2 years of legal back and forth, but she got the full £800 plus interest. She said, "It's not even about the money anymore. It's about Jean finally facing consequences." The blog evolved into something bigger than any of us expected. We started getting contacted by journalists doing stories on legal reform, universities doing research on SLAPP suits, even a documentary filmmaker who wanted to make a film about abusive litigation. My husband was supportive but worried. He said, "This is taking up a lot of your time. Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" I said, "I don't feel like I have a choice. Every week, someone reaches out saying they're going through what we went through. How do I ignore that?" He said, "You can't save everyone." I said, "I know, but I can try to help some of them." We had this same conversation multiple times over the next year. He wasn't wrong. The blog and the advocacy work were consuming hours every week, but it also felt important in a way my receptionist job never had. Eventually, I quit the receptionist job and focused on the blog full-time. We couldn't afford for me not to work, so I started accepting donations through the website. Not much came in at first, maybe £100 a month, but gradually it grew. People who we'd helped would donate. Lawyers who appreciated having resources to send their clients would donate. After a year, I was making enough from donations and a few paid speaking engagements to match what I'd been making at the receptionist job. It wasn't sustainable long-term, but it worked for now. My husband got another promotion at work, which helped financially. His new position had better hours too, so he could be home more with our son. Life had settled into this new normal where Jean was always there in the background but not consuming us anymore. She was a story we told, a case study we referenced, a reminder of why the work mattered. Then about 4 months ago, something unexpected happened. I got a letter in the mail, handwritten on plain white paper, no return address. The letter said, "I know I'm not supposed to contact you. I know you probably hate me, but I need you to know something. I've been in therapy for 2 years. Real therapy, not court-ordered. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and I'm on medication now. None of that excuses what I did, but it helps me understand why I did it. I destroyed friendships and hurt people because I couldn't handle rejection or criticism or being wrong. I turned small problems into catastrophes because that's how everything felt to me. I'm writing this not to ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve that. I'm writing to say I'm sorry and to thank you for stopping me. If you and Mark hadn't exposed me in that first court case, I would have kept going until I destroyed myself completely. The consequences I faced were the best thing that ever happened to me, even though I didn't see it that way at the time. I hope you and your family are doing well. I hope your son doesn't remember any of this when he's older. Jean. I read the letter 3 times. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me thought it might be another manipulation, but the tone felt different than anything Jean had ever said before. I showed my husband. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing. She's not allowed to contact me, and I'm not breaking the no contact order to respond." He said, "Do you believe her?" I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. People can change. But it doesn't change what she did. I put the letter in a drawer and didn't think about it again for weeks. Then one day, I was talking to my therapist. Yes, I'd started seeing a therapist about a year into all of this, and I mentioned the letter. My therapist asked, "How did receiving it make you feel?" I said, confused, and maybe a little bit sad. She said, "Sad for her or sad for yourself?" I said, "Both. I'm sad that she went through whatever she went through that made her act that way, but I'm also sad for us and everyone else she hurt." My therapist said, "You can hold both of those feelings. Her mental health struggles don't erase the damage she caused, but they do provide context." I asked, "Should I respond?" She said, "Do you want to respond?" I said, "I don't know." After that session, I thought about it for days. Finally, I decided to write a response. Not to send to Jean, but just to write for myself. I wrote about how her actions had affected us. The fear and stress and financial burden. The way my husband still got anxious in certain situations. The way I still felt my heart race when I saw someone who looked like her. But I also wrote that I hoped she was getting the help she needed. That I hoped she'd really changed. That I hoped she'd found some peace. I never sent the letter. I kept it in the same drawer as Jean's letter. Sometimes I'd take them both out and read them. It felt like closing a chapter that needed to be closed. Around this same time, the documentary filmmaker I mentioned, her name was Amara Chen, finished her film. It was called Sue Happy, The Cost of Frivolous Litigation, and it featured our story along with 4 other cases from around the country. Amara had spent months interviewing us, filming in our home, talking to our son. She'd interviewed Iris and Tessa too. She'd even managed to get a brief interview with Mark, who'd moved to another city but agreed to participate. The film premiered at a small film festival and then got picked up by a streaming service. It was released on a Tuesday in October. Within a week, it had been watched by over 1 million people. Our phones wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from people we hadn't talked to in years. Old friends, former coworkers, distant relatives. Everyone wanted to talk about the documentary. Some people were supportive, others were critical in weird ways. One of my husband's cousins messaged saying, "Why would you air your dirty laundry like that?" My husband responded, "Because other people need to know this can happen to them." The documentary brought another wave of attention to the blog. We were getting hundreds of emails a week from people asking for help or sharing their own stories. Iris and Tessa and I couldn't keep up with all of them. We brought on 2 more people to help moderate and respond. Both were people who'd been through similar situations and wanted to give back. The work became almost like a full-time operation. We set up a nonprofit organization to handle donations properly. We established a legal fund to help people who couldn't afford anti-SLAPP lawyers. We created educational materials for people representing themselves. My husband joked that Jean had accidentally given me a career. I said, "She didn't give me anything. We built this despite her, not because of her." But there was some truth to what he said. My whole life had changed direction because of what happened with Jean. I'd gone from being a receptionist to running a nonprofit that helped hundreds of people a year. Last month, we held our first annual conference on abusive litigation. We rented out a hotel conference room and about 200 people showed up. Victims of SLAPP suits, lawyers who handle these cases, legislators working on reform, journalists covering the issue. Diane Rojas, the legislator who'd championed our law, gave the keynote speech. She talked about how our law had been a model for legislation in 3 other states. She said change happens when ordinary people refuse to be silenced. The people in this room represent that change. During the networking session, I met dozens of people who shared their stories. A teacher sued by a parent for giving their child a bad grade. A restaurant owner sued by a former employee for workplace harassment that never happened. A blogger sued by a corporation for writing a negative review. Every story was different, but they all had the same core elements. Someone with power or money or just vindictiveness, using the legal system as a weapon. Someone else trying to survive it. A woman approached me during the conference and said, "I saw you in the documentary. I wanted to thank you. My neighbor was suing me for £8,000, claiming my tree roots damaged her foundation. She had no proof. I was about to settle just to make it go away, but then I watched the documentary and looked up the anti-SLAPP law. I filed a motion and won. She has to pay my legal fees." Stories like that made everything worth it. Every sleepless night, every dollar we'd struggled to find, every moment of fear and stress.